Welcome back to my shop. If you've been following my videos, recently I did a YZ250 full motor rebuild, and during that video I was checking the true of the crank on this truing stand right on top of this granite table right here. Ignore all the mess here. But while I was doing that, I accidentally dropped the crank and it hit here and it knocked it off true. Now before I dropped it, it was coming up to 0.03 millimeters of runout, and the Yamaha service manual says the standard amount is 0.03 runout, with 0.05 millimeter runout being the maximum. So that was a new crank and it was at the standard, but I didn't have a copper hammer, one of these right here. I didn't have one at the time to true it in, so I had the stand but not the hammer, so there was nothing I could do, and I was in a rush. I wanted to ride my bike, so I went ahead and ordered a whole nother crank, if you remember correctly, and that one I put on the truing stand and checked the true, and it was 0.01 millimeters. So that was actually better than standard, and that made me feel really good. But I told you guys I was going to try to true this crank in, and first let me show you a video real fast from that video, showing you how far out it was. Here you go. You're going to want to be a little suspicious. I actually only dropped mine right here on this granite table, and it only fell from about that high, but boom, but it hit just right. You'll be amazed it was enough. I mean, that granite table is real hard, but it did its job. It knocked it off true. So I'm going to show you. I got it zeroed here with the crank pin. You can see it's all the way over there. I'm only going to do one side. I'm going to save you from doing the whole thing. I just want to show you how far out of true I knocked it just by dropping it. 8. So as far as 8.08 millimeters, it's back to 0 with the crank pin over there. Let's do one more rotation here. Yeah, so it's 0.08 off. Moral of the story, don't drop your crank. Now what I did earlier was I marked which side was the high spot, and then I spun the crank around and did the same thing, rotated it, marked which side was the high spot, and sure enough, they're opposite. The high spots are opposite of each other, and their one high spot is, I believe, right here, and the other high, oh no, that's right, it was over here, and the other high spot is over here. So that indicates that the crank has like they've twisted like that. And when I looked at the little ding that was on the end, sure enough, what I find with the stand and the dial indicator matches where I would have hit it right here, just enough to twist it off. So again, I never have true crank before. I did go ahead and order a copper hammer, 1.5 pounds. I'm going to learn how to true this crank and get this crank back in service, get it ready to be used again, and that way I can use it maybe on my next rebuild or something. But meanwhile, I do have another one brand new that's coming in, and hopefully that one hasn't been dropped and I can put it in the bike. But truing is important, because with it out of true, if it was out of true when it's in the motor spinning, this end right here will go up and down, and that end will go up and down. And what that does is that prematurely wears out your main bearings, your crank bearings that go on right here. It wears them out. Not only that, when it's shifting, when the crank's shifting around like that on this, it can also wear out the journal right here that on the crank. You can tell, because these will, when you go to take the motor apart, this will be shiny and smooth, which means it's been walking, it's been moving around, and that's not good. So you definitely want a good true crank if you want your bottom end to get good life out of your crank bearings and to not permanently damage your crank. So that's why you need a good true crank. All right, as you can see that that crank was knocked out to 0.08, and that was pretty far out. But I have trued it back in. Now, sorry I didn't do it on video, but I'll show you what I did and how I did it, so if you're at home and you need to do it yourself, you can. down in the description, I will have links, multiple links. Some of the links will be to the video where I rebuilt my motor and I dropped the crank. So if you're interested in watching the whole thing in the full, and also above, and most importantly, there'll be a link at the very top, and that is the two-stroke stuffing video where he uses a small crank, something like this, but he illustrates to us where to hit it, you know, after we take our measurements, where we need to hit it at, and that's real important. I followed his video and he got it. Following his video, thanks to him, I got it right on. So if you happen to catch this video, two-stroke stuffing, thanks, brother. I appreciate it. But before I show you what I did, let me show you how good I got it in. Okay, I zeroed it out. If I see any negatives, I'll zero it out again so that we only get positive numbers. Look at this. Check that out. Is that cool or what? I got that side perfectly trued. But let's check the other side. Just lift it off here. Spin it around. Let me get everything set up. Alright, let's do it. If I see a negative, I'll zero it out so that we can get a clear picture of what the overall runout is. I'm just spinning it slowly here. Got a 0.01. And it's back to 0. So 0.01 millimeters is what I got this crank to. And I'm not going to try to get it any better than that because honestly, it's tough. It's harder. It's hard, I promise you, to get it absolutely perfect. But standard, if you remember, standard Yamaha manual says 0.03. And this crank came out the box at 0.03, and then I dropped it and ended up 0.08. And then the new one I ordered and came in was a 0.01. So this is as good as the new one that I ordered that was, I considered spectacular because it was better than standard. With obviously the maximum Yamaha says 0.05. So this crank is trued in great. And so let me show you how I did that. I followed the instructions of two-stroke stuffing's video where he tells you where to hit it at after you take your measurements, and his video indicated to me that I need to hit it over here on this side. So I put marks right here so I would know where to hit it at. Took this hammer right here. This is a 1.5 pound copper, brass, whatever you want to call it, hammer. Don't use a regular hammer for these. You will dent the crank up, I promise you. This is a trash crank right here, so I'll show you. See that dent that I put in it right there? Watch this. You see where the copper hit? Once I wipe the copper away, you can't see where it hit at all, but you can see where the metal hammer hit over here. Can't see where the copper one hit. So you want to use a copper hammer. Trust me, don't use a regular hammer. You will dent your crank. Yeah, you see it chips these things away. These aren't cheap either. This is used. I picked this one up used on eBay for 50 bucks. They're not cheap. Brand new, I think they're closer to 100. But this is what you need. I promise you, don't hit it with a regular hammer. Now, this crank is all trued in, so I don't want to hit this one. But the video showed me that I need to hit it right there. So what I did, I'm going to use this one right here. This is an older crank. Still good, but I'm just going to show you. At first, I followed some of the other people's videos where they said to hold the crank in your hand like this, or in your lap, and smack it. And I was hitting it as hard as I could, and then I'd put it back on the the stand, and I wasn't getting any movement. So what I had to do is I had to come up the workbench right here and put just 1/2 of it on the workbench, this left half right here, and leave the right half hanging over. And I gave it a little twist so the rod didn't jingle around. Then I would hold it, and that's where I would bam, smack it. And that's what it took. I had to put it on the bench. Now, in Two-Stroke Stuffing's video, he shows you how sometimes if they're pinched in, you might have to wedge it in here, or if they're spread out, you might have to put it in a vise and cramp it in. I didn't have to do that. Only thing I had were 2 halves that were spun like that. So, but it's, you know, and his crank that he was using is relatively small, and I know smaller cranks are easier to do. asking around, talking to people, they told me that these were really hard to true because you know it's a big crank, but it's doable. So if you have a YZ250 and you buy a new crank, it doesn't hurt to buy some. I mean, to make some type of stand here, and you can even makeshift this at home. Honestly, you can get creative and just make something to hold your crank up. It's really easy to do, but it's good to check your crank because sometimes cranks get dropped even before they get to you. This is a box. Hold on. No, this ain't the box. There's another box that it came in, but you can see they don't put much padding in here, and if they drop it before it gets to you, well, it could get knocked off the true. So it is good to check the true before you put it in, especially if you're looking to do a pretty decent build and you're looking to push a lot of horsepower and you want it to last a good while. I mean, your crank bearings are your main crank bearings are gonna last a lot longer if your crank is trued in well. So now I'm going to show you about how hard I had to hit it, but I'm not going to hit this crank because this one is still actually good. It's the one I pulled out of my bike. It's still in good shape, so if someone needs it, I got it. But this is how hard I had to hit it. I'm going to use this donor. This one's been welded, so it's not going to shift, but I'm going to show you how hard I had to hit it. Let me move my hands. I'm going to hit my hand. That would be funny on the video. That's pretty much what I had to do. A lot of times I would hit it one time and put it on the stand and I wouldn't see any change, and I'd hit it again, put it on the stand, I wouldn't see any change, and what I caught on is usually on the first hit it wouldn't move because the first hit I'm just kind of like dialing in how my aim and dialing in how hard I have to hit it. And so then I started doing multiple hits, like 2 or 3 hits, and I would find by my second or third hit I would really get a good smack in. So don't be scared to hit it 2 or 3 times before you measure it again if you're not getting any movement. And I'll show you one more time. Here we go. See how the second hit was harder? Typically you'll get your aim in, second hit might be harder, maybe third will be harder. But that's how I did it. So I'm pretty excited, guys. That's the first crank I've ever trued, and it came out good. You saw it for yourself. And you saw it on the stand, you saw the measurements. I'm going to put this in the box because this is going in my friend Dylan's bike. I'm doing a full rebuild in his. Yeah, so anyway, let me put this one on. This is the one that came out of my bike, and my bike was running fine. But let me just show you that this one was even off a little bit. Same thing, when I see a minus, I'll zero it out just so we get the maximum number. This is the one that came out of my bike. I'm going to work on this one a little bit later too and try to get it right. Let's see where it's at. There's a 0.05. So that's the maximum. That's what Yamaha says is the maximum, with 0.03 being the standard. So this one is at the maximum. I always like to go spin it till I get back to 0 if I can. There it is. So this one's at the maximum. I pulled it out. It's got 135 hours on it, and it's at 0.05. I already checked the other side. I'm not going to do that on camera, but it's pretty much the same thing. And I'm going to true this one in later on. I mean, the rod bearing, it's still got some life on it. Someone could use it. It's a good used crank. But so if you need to true a crank, get a 1.5 pound copper hammer. I got this one used on eBay for 50 bucks. Run out to Harbor Freight, get a dial indicator, and get a magnetic stand or some type of stand to hold it. I think I paid total about 50 or 60 bucks for this whole setup, and then I had a friend of mine weld this stand together. But you can get creative at home and make something real fast just to hold the crank up, so, as long as it's V'd out like this and the crank can sit in it. And another tip too that I don't hear discussed very much is it is kind of important to, if you're measuring this side right here, to slide the crank all the way to the right if you're measuring on the right side, and get this dial indicator closest to the perfectly smooth edge that you can on the YZ250. That's smooth. That's a smooth edge right there. You know, obviously you don't want it up back here, but you want the distance between here to here, as much distance as you can, because that's going to amplify the number, and that's going to give you a higher reading, which is what you want, better, higher resolution. Because if I slid this thing all the way to right here, well, it's going to read the same the whole time. If I put it right in the middle, I'm going to get half the reading. So this was 0.05. If I had it right here in the middle, it would be 0.25. I mean 0.025. And all the way over here would be 0.5. So it's important to have it as far away, these two, the bracket that's holding it up and the dial indicator, separate them as much as you can to get the highest reading. That way you get the highest resolution in your measurement. Ooh, I have my YZ250 crammed in here in the back shed right now with my YZ450. I'll be running the YZ125 this weekend at an FTR race, so that's pretty cool. It's the first time I've had this thing in an FTR race. First time I've had a 125 at an FTR race, so that's going to be interesting. That's why this one is front and center. But yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. I just wanted to get you up to speed that I was able to get this crank trued. And my suggestion, since I've done this, would be if you're using a brand new crank, it doesn't hurt to check the true before you put it in, or at least make sure the box doesn't show signs that it's been dropped. If you're using a used crank or reusing a crank, then I would say you definitely want to check the true before you put it in if you want to get good life out of your motor. Or if you have someone press a new rod and rod bearing on for you, check their work, bring it home and check the true. And if you have a crank and it's out, it is possible to get them straight at home. So that's pretty much it, guys. Stay tuned. I will have a video review coming up in, I don't know, a few weeks. YZ250 two-stroke, the rad valve versus the V-force versus the stock reeds. If you're not subscribed, please click subscribe, and I will keep these videos coming. Catch you guys later.